Welcome to your Director's Glove of America podcast and backstage pass to the biggest names in the game, the power players. I'm Jennifer Gilhouse, your co-host along Kyla Kwa. Today, we invite you to listen to episode number 7, which is a conversation with Dr. Jack Groppel. He is a transformational performance coach who is in the midst of finishing up his book called The Mountains Within, which will be out this January. Also, make sure to listen to our other 6 episodes of Power Players. We have some great conversations with top leaders, GMs, directors in our industry, and you will get so much insider information. We know you will enjoy this episode, so make sure to subscribe. And if you want to keep the conversation going, as always, we invite you to follow us on LinkedIn, comment on our posts, and let us know what you think. Remember, no filter needed. Enjoy! Okay, welcome to Power Players. Today we have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Jack Groppel, who is a professor, tennis coach, entrepreneur, author, corporate consultant, and a motivational speaker. He's all the wonderful things, and on top of it, a wonderful human being. So we are so excited to talk with you today, Dr. Groppel.
I'm honored to be with you guys. Thanks for inviting me.
It's great to have you on, Dr. Jack Groppel. Everyone knows that you have an illustrious history with the racket sports industry. And usually on this podcast, what we like to do is we like to start off with one burning question. For you, I'm going to handle it a little bit differently.
This will be good.
Because, listen, I figure with you, it has to be something special. So what I want to do is I want to go back to a time in your life. I'm going to read a quote here.
Okay.
And I want you to tell us where you were, what you were doing, and how important this quote was to you in your life. You ready? Jack Groppel, if you really apply yourself, you could become a pioneering leader in the science of tennis performance. What does that quote mean to you? Where did you take it? And what can racket sports professionals currently do when they hear something like that?
We could do this entire podcast on this right now. I had just gotten in the field of kinesiology. It was the end of the first semester. You got to understand, my undergraduate degree was actually in wildlife biology because my father forced me to go into agriculture because I had to walk on the tennis team. I told him, look, I'm going to play for Illinois. And he said he thought I was nuts. See, so if he had to pay for the education, I had to get a degree in something that he felt was worthwhile. So my undergraduate degree was in wildlife biology. I couldn't get a job and started grad school in population genetics, and I hated it. I was changing flour in test tubes 3 days a week so little beetles could breed more rapidly and we could study progeny generations. And I was crying myself to sleep at 22. My sister, bless her heart, she was the angel in my life at the time. She talked me into speaking with the people in physical education. That was the department name at the time. So I went and they graciously admitted me to the program. And my first semester, I took cadaver anatomy, kinesiology, and exercise physiology. And I fell in love with it, got straight A's. But my kines professor was Dr. Charles Dillman. And it was at the end of that first semester, he and I were meeting, and he'd gotten to know who I was and my background. And he knew that I'd just loved tennis. And he said those 17 words to me, Kyle. And that was all it took. I created my own career. And I'm honestly, those 17 words launched me and my career.
What was it about those 17 words, though, that struck a chord with you more than anything else? Because I'm sure at that age, you've been given advice before from a lot of other people. What was it about that specifically?
It was an opportunity to really do something in tennis because I wasn't going to be good enough to be a player. I was 22 and I'd played at Illinois, but I wasn't good enough to play. In fact, I played a satellite or two and I got drummed. And I just said, this isn't going to be pretty. And I did it just to find out, and it didn't take long. I'm not a slow learner there. But it created an opening in the sport that I love that I might be able to do something. I might be able to really contribute. And I literally said, okay, I'm going to be the best in the world at this. Because Vic Braden had started, but Vic was really getting started himself. Vic was already a legendary coach, but he was just starting to use high-speed film, and I started doing it. And then Vic launched. Vic just was such a mentor to me, but that was how everything got started in my whole career, was those 17 words. And I can tell you exactly where we were in the building, on the campus at the University of Illinois, and the month and the year. That's how powerful it was.
So you mentioned about the best and about leadership. And If anyone knows about those two words, it's probably you've coached leaders at every level.
Thank you.
So, what do the best leaders in high performance environments consistently do differently than everyone else?
I think the really great leaders, we throw out words all the time. Character, I think character is critically important. I think authenticity, very important. But I think the greatest leaders in the world are have empathy. I think they really work hard to try to understand what the environment is, not just for their employees, but for their clients. They're great communicators. They try hard to understand and to be understood. Great leaders, there's a agape love, I think. You got to be careful using that word. But I really do believe that great leaders demonstrate agape, real care for other human beings. So I think it's the combination of all those, I think, that really is the plaster cast for a great leader. It's everything. It's not just one thing or one word, but it's all these things put together that you say, how do you possibly do that? Because it's complex. Yes and no. Depends on who you are. And that's where the character piece comes in. The character piece is the foundation. And they're really quite easy if it's who you are as a human being.
Yeah. What would you say has been the key to all your success? Because you've moved around, you've done different kinds of things in the industry, and yet you've found success in most of them. Was it your love for the sport? Was it some sort of intrinsic motivation, level of motivation that you have? Like, what differentiates you from some people that haven't been able to do what you have done?
I don't know if there's anything that differentiated me so much. I really don't. I was definitely an opportunist, and I would say I was the ultimate opportunist in my career. If a door opened, I didn't just walk through it, I burst through it. And sometimes, Jennifer, I burst through it and I didn't know what I was doing. I honestly did not. I taught myself to play tennis. Who does that? And then you play for a Big Ten university and then you coach at a Big Ten university. Who does that? I never had a business class yet. With Jim, we started a business with our own money and sold it to a Fortune 50 company. Who does that? Again, I've never had a speech class, yet I've traveled the world and spoken in front of millions in live audiences. The largest live audience was 30,000 people. I never had a speech class. And I'm not bragging when I say that. What I'm saying is, don't be afraid of being an opportunist. Doors are going to open for everybody watching this right now. And I would challenge you, gosh, go through that door. You may not know, because a lot of us go, I don't know if I'm trained well enough. No, you're probably not.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can do that. Maybe you can't, but you don't know that. If I would have said, I'll never forget the speaking engagement I was asked to do for this large success seminar tour I was on in the 90s. I tell this story in my book that's coming out in January. But I had done a large event for them, about 5,000 people in the room. And I'd actually spoken at groups for 1,000 to 1,500. So it was another sea of humanity. I was following the very famous motivational speaker Zig Ziglar, and then I was preceding Mary Lou Retton, the famous gymnast. It was a perfect amount of discomfort for me because instead of 1,000 people and corporate executives, it was 5,000 very famous people. So it was probably the perfect level of discomfort. But now I get the invitation for the next event. They call me and literally, I'm so full of myself. My brain's gotten reset. I'm now set to 5,000 people, Zig Ziglar, Mary Lou Retton. And I get the call that we'd like you to speak at our next event. And I'm going, sure, absolutely. I'm full of myself. I can do this. And I said, where's it going to be? She goes, Atlanta. Right away, I think the World Congress Center, the convention center. And I said, okay, great. What's the venue? And she literally said, the Georgia Dome. And when she said that, my brain went from, remember now, I had recalibrated my brain to 5,000 people, Zig Ziglar, Mary Lou Retton. Now she says the Georgia Dome, and I immediately panicked. This is
Mm.
the truth. And I think this is what happens to the human brain. I was immediately thrown into a panic. And I went, wait, where the Falcons play? And my voice cracked and everything. And, and she said, yeah, that's where. I said, how many people? Literally, I mean, I'm in panic mode because I know it seats like 70,000 or 65,000. And she said, we think we can only fill half of it. We think we can get about 30,000. Now you go into survival mode. Now I'm no longer panicking. Now I'm survival because now it's all about me. And I'm going, 30,000 people. They have no idea who I am. And I said, who would I be following? And she goes, Christopher Reeve.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm going, you got to be blanking kidding me. Now, see, I'm in survival mode. It's all about me. And I'm being very transparent right now because I think this is what happens to the human brain when you're thrown into a situation you don't know what to do. So I panicked and then I'm in survival. She said, Christopher Reeve. And I immediately, all I see is everybody crying when I walk on stage because here's Superman, who's now a quadriplegic.
Mm.
And everybody's going to be tearful. And I'm going, I got nothing. I got nothing in front of 30,000 people. You got to be kidding me. And then I just go into apathy. This is what happens to the human brain, I believe. Panic, survival, apathy. You got to be kidding. Then I went, who would I be preceding? And she goes, Margaret Thatcher.
Oh,
I just went, I just flew the pen up in the air and I went, saw the big loser L on my forehead. And I'm going, the tape that says, who's he? Because all I am is a good bathroom break. Seriously, Christopher Reeve, Margaret Thatcher, I got to go to the bathroom right now. This is a perfect time. So I literally had 30 seconds to keep them in their seats. And I rehearsed it and practiced it. And I practiced not the Sea of Humanity here, but here and here into the up the rafters and everything. We worked so hard, my team and I, on my delivery in that first 30 seconds to keep them in their seats. But I think that's a good example that I was not trained for that. Yet I accepted it. I accepted the challenge. When we hung up, I just went, you got to be kidding me. Did I really just say yes? Because I don't even know where to start. And I think that's a good example.
Well, that's so funny that you went into that story because that's actually something I wanted to ask you about. Because, first of all, that sounds really stressful. But I wanted to ask you how you deal with stress. So, a lot of leaders are under a lot more stress than the people that they're managing or leading. They tend to carry more of the weight. How do you personally do it, or any tips for the listeners on how to deal with that?
Again, we could do a whole webinar, you realize, on this because first of all, stress, I'll start with as an exercise physiologist, stress is not negative. See, stress has been given a bad name. We view stress as evil, when in fact, without stress, we would die. See, we're members of the animal kingdom. We're biological organisms. And if you took stress totally out of our lives, we would wither and die and wither away. So stress itself isn't unhealthy. Too much stress can be unhealthy, or too linear stress that's just nonstop can be unhealthy, and no recovery can be unhealthy. For example, people that don't sleep well, people that don't exercise at all, we know the body gets weaker. So the idea of stress, there's many different layers to discussing stress. Now, how have I dealt with it? I've learned to compartmentalize very well. One of the things in working with world-class athletes over the years that you realize that, and at the Olympics, for example, when the gun goes off in the finals, nobody cares if you and your significant other have had an argument. Nobody
Mhm.
cares if you didn't, if your car got stuck in traffic on the way to the stadium. I'm sorry, that won't show up and there won't be an asterisk by your name that you didn't win or you didn't get a medal because you and your significant other had an argument. And that was something that was really an aha moment in a lot of ways to understand that, and you got to be careful how you do this. But for the record books, nobody cares that you've had a tough time. And that was helpful for me because I said, okay, nobody cares that I'm not happy right now. I've got to do this job. I'm hired as a professional speaker. I'm hired to do this job. If I had a problem on the way here, nobody cares. And it really doesn't matter. I've still got to deliver. I got to deliver the goods. So I learned to compartmentalize really well. And I think over the years, I've learned how to get recovery when I could and get it in small bites. So you can get recovery by napping, by laughter. Laughter is a great mechanism of recovery. I think I've learned over the years those two things to compartmentalize things so I could perform on demand because that's what it is. It's perform on demand. If the demand is there, you must perform. And for a lot of people, that's really difficult to do because it's there. I just had that problem and it's still right there. And I can't compartmentalize it. It's part of training. You literally train to compartmentalize. So I think I became really good at that.
So I need to ask you a question because you brought up something that I've considered quite a bit. I keep hearing this word authenticity,
Yeah.
and it's a pet peeve of mine because everyone's you need to be authentic, you need to be authentic. But again, people don't care if you're happy right now. They care about whether you perform. It's pretty much what you said. That's a tough truth for a lot of professionals who are under constant stress. So my question to you is, how do you reconcile that tension between performing under pressure and living authentically?
Okay, so we got to step back a little bit. This
Okay.
is why we've always believed, I've always believed, we've always believed, Jim and I and the company that we had, start with purpose. What matters most to you? Then that becomes your that becomes your baseline. So when you start with purpose, if you're authentic, everything you do is based on your purpose. You make decisions based on your purpose. Now, you may not, for example, when I went on stage, my purpose may not have been being on stage, but I also had a lot of different layers of that. My company was investing a lot of money in me being there. I had to perform. I had to sell $50,000 worth of product within an hour of finishing. And I ended up selling $1 million of product from stage in 5 years. And that's pressure. But I couldn't think about that moment. That's like hitting the serve at 4 all in the third in a grand slam. You can't think about whether you're going to win the grand slam. You can't think about whether you're going to sell the product. You have to learn to stay in the moment so that you can perform at the level that you must, and then the results will take care of themselves. This is the lesson, Kyle, I believe in being authentic, that you authentically stay in the moment and you perform in the moment based on who you are and your purpose. Then you let the results take care of themselves. Because when I was speaking, I think that's a great word picture. I had no control on how people received that information from me. I had no control over 30,000 people. I only had control over me. So I was in total control of what I was thinking about, what I would say, how I would move, how I would anchor myself, how I would connect with the audience. I felt that if I did my job, the results would take care of themselves. And I had to believe in that and trust it. And then based on my purpose, I was able to perform on demand.
Yeah. What
Wow.
about beyond performance? You talked about linear stress that kind of piqued my curiosity, but what
Mhm.
about beyond performance? What about just in overall just satisfaction, being happy with life?
Yeah. Again, I think it starts with purpose. I think, for example, I'll be very vulnerable right now. I have no problem with this because, as I say, I'm writing my memoir right now, and I'm pretty vulnerable in the book. I had a hard time when I was younger being alone. I hated being alone, and it wasn't that I just never learned how to be alone. As a young adult, I struggled with that. I'll be very honest with you, and I had to be doing something or whatever it was, whatever doing something meant. And now I live by myself and I'm as happy as a pea in a pod. Honestly, I couldn't be happier right now. I'm single. I live by myself. I'm on top of the world. Play tennis every day. What more could I ask for? But earlier in my life, I wasn't. And I think that was part of the whole idea of the struggles that I had with had to be gone, had to go do something, had to be productive, had to be. And that's how I lived. And yes, that helped me become who I was, but it also was a struggle.
Yeah. Because
Certainly hurt with
that
relationships. Let me tell you that. It certainly hurt with relationships.
oh, I'm sure. And that's something that we talk a lot about here too, is the whole concept of work-life balance, because some of us can be very passionate and about what we do
Mhm.
that you're not really thinking of how many hours you're spending or how, and then maybe you get a little burned out. That certainly happens to me.
I understand.
Speaking from experience, there's this whole concept of work-life balance. What has been a model that works for you? Some people talk about only working so many days a week, or
Yeah.
is it, tell us your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I think you got to be careful with the word balance
Hmm.
because the word balance
Yeah.
is like the justice system, the scale, that you're not going to find that because you spend a lot of time at work. You're not going to find if balance of the scales is what you're looking for, you won't find it. I
Yeah.
think you have to think about words like integrity, integrating work and life, or harmony, where they work together. But you also have to have boundaries. I think that is huge. I will tell you that I struggled with boundaries earlier in my life. I would say yes to everything. If I was invited to do anything, yes, I'll do it. And here I could have been married and sorry, I've got to travel. Really? As I look back on that now,
Yeah.
could I have said no? Sure, I could have. Did I? Nope. And it hurt. So I was in this constant pursuit, this struggle that I had. And my advice to anybody is always ask yourself the question, what matters most right now? Is it getting on that plane? Is it giving that lesson? Or is it maybe going home and being with the people that matter most in my life?
Mhm.
What matters most right now? That is a key question.
Constantly checking in with yourself.
Constantly. Because you see, when I wrote the corporate athlete book in December of 99, at the end of the book, I have a 24-hour time management system, not just your workday, 24 hours. So what I had people do in that was I want you to put everything in there when you're asleep, when you're eating, when you're at work, when whatever you're doing, I want the entire day so that you understand the kinds of time you have and where you need boundaries. And that was really eye-opening for a lot of people when I would have that conversation with them. Don't look at your day as just your work day. Look at it as 24 hours. When are you connecting with your family? When are you getting your exercise time in? And suddenly they start going, holy crap. Wow. It's just a different perspective. So I would look at words like integration and harmony before the word balance.
And again, I think it has to do a lot with purpose, right?
It
If you
does. It
have a
all comes back to
purpose,
that.
yeah, if you have a purpose, you're going to be probably a lot more focused and a lot more disciplined on what you're looking to do and how you spend your time. And
Yeah,
if you
everything.
value your time becomes more valuable.
100%. And even the word resilience, it all comes back to purpose. If you are a person who lives your purpose, it's easier to be more resilient. It's easier to make the right decisions. It's easier, and this is why I guess that's wisdom later in life that I can say this now and understand it much more clearly than I understood it earlier in my life.
Yeah, purpose is different for everybody,
Oh, yeah.
right? And probably one of the reasons why some people are constantly hungry for what's next, what's the next big thing. And some people are very happy to stay put and do one thing their whole life. Some people, some coaches are happy to teach their whole entire career. So, yeah, that's a very interesting concept.
What's fascinating? The idea that are you comfortable in your own skin? Are you comfortable with the decisions you're making? Are you are the decisions you're making only affecting you or are they affecting other people? I think we just have to really look at the whole landscape of the decisions we make.
So let's talk about being comfortable in your own skin,
Sure.
because you mentioned something earlier about how you would just burst into a room and you would just go. And early in your career, you said yes to everything. Where do you think that comes from?
Mine, I know exactly where mine came from. I had a hard charging father, and my dad, we were very estranged. My dad believed in hard and then work harder. That was basically, and it was all about the only time I ever saw my dad like raise his eyebrows and be really happy was when he saw some achievement, like whether it was sport, whether it was something. So I felt that's who I had to become. I had to just become an achiever. And I literally had achievement addiction. I was an Eagle Scout at 13. Tell me anybody that does that's stupid. I would never recommend anybody to do that. And I intentionally got my Eagle 1 week before I turned 14. And then what I get out of my dad was, not many people have done that before. Okay. And then I hit a grand slam home run when I was a kid before I ever took up tennis. Dad never came to any of my sporting events. So you really went deep with that question. What drove you? And I came home one night, hit a grand slam to win the game. I come home and I tell Dad, he's reading the newspaper. I told him I hit a grand slam to win the game. And he folds the paper down. He says, how about that? And then he straightens the paper back up and starts reading again. This was
Yeah,
my childhood. So it was all about the only time I ever got recognition was perform. And yes, I took that on. So here I was, a young man, and at the end of the day, psychologically, I was probably just looking for the love of my father. Never heard the
yeah.
words "I love you" till I was 46 years old, and I
Mm,
made him say them then. And you really start to understand anybody that's been a high achiever, what was their motivating factor? Mine was that. I'm not saying everybody's had childhood wounds, but mine was, and it drove me. Now, yes, I've done a lot, grateful for everything I've been able to do, but at what cost?
sure. Yeah. My childhood was eerily similar to yours. You pretty much just summed it up for me as well. Dealing with that, how does someone first off just get to that point where they can just admit that and accept it? And then how do you build on from that and say, okay, I can either become different or I can be self-reflective or I'm just going to be the same hard charging person that I've always been.
Yeah,
How does someone get to that point?
that's hard because I think it's like any addiction. I think you've got to hit rock bottom a little bit. What does rock bottom look like? If you're an achiever, you're getting all this accolades, you're getting all this applause. So I think it depends on the situation. For me, it was about dad My dad, as I say, he never came to any of my sporting events, never came to anything. In fact, when my sister talked me into going to talk to people in physical education, your very first question, my biggest fear was telling dad because he wasn't going to support that because he was a public school teacher. He didn't think there was a career in physical education. So when I met with the department head, this will blow you away. You talk about divine intervention. So the department head was willing to admit me to the master's program. And he said, "What do you think about this?" I said, "I'm just concerned how I'm going to pay for it because I know I'm not going to be able to." And he said, "Didn't you say you played tennis here at Illinois?" And I said, "I did." And he said, "Why don't I waive your tuition? And I need somebody to teach my activity classes, my tennis classes. Would you do that for me? I'll pay you a small stipend." I literally am walking out of his office. Thank you, God. Thank you. And called dad that night. And sure enough, he cut me off. And he said, "I'm not paying for this." I said, "You don't have to. I got it covered." And that brought up a whole different level of conversation. How'd you pull that off the thing? But anyway, you have to learn to stand up for yourself. You have to learn to advocate for yourself. And I think you have to really ask yourself again, coming back, what matters most right now?
Yeah.
You can
Just
go as deep as you want on this stuff. I'm happy to. I don't care. It's good.
Yeah.
no, that's good. I wanted to, if it's okay with Kyle, I don't know if you have a follow-up, Kyle.
No, I didn't. I'm just taking his answer in because I feel like our childhoods were pretty much identical. So it's all
Yeah.
good. You can go ahead and ask.
No, I wanted to ask Dr. Groppel about emotional intelligence because it's something that we often hear about in leadership and just understanding what emotional intelligence is and how can you improve it as a professional.
Oh, I think you can always improve it. It's about being, if there's a short, easy word picture, it's about how aware are you of everything that's going on? How responsive are you without a knee-jerk response? How, instead of reactive, are you responsive? I think that's a good word picture. Some people are very reactive. They don't have a high emotional intelligence. If you're responsive, I believe that's that word. You take in all the information and then you respond appropriately. That's more toward emotional intelligence. Kyle, you asked the question about great leaders. I believe great leaders don't react, they respond. And that's how I've always taught that is the idea of being really aware of what the information is. Sometimes we remember the game of telephone when we were kids where you whisper something to somebody and we think we heard what we heard and then we have a reaction to what we heard when in fact that wasn't how it all was. And that's where the whole idea of active listening, really great leaders are good active listeners. They can reflect what they just heard and then they can make appropriate decisions. So I think emotional intelligence plays a big role, Jennifer. It's part of wisdom as well. Just understanding the young child that touches the stove burns his or her hand. That's knowledge. The stove is hot. Wisdom is don't touch that stove again.
And it
I
also
mean,
comes back to what you were talking about, which is just awareness, checking in with yourself. What matters to you? What am
yeah,
I doing right now?
yeah.
Dr. Groppel, I know that you're quite experienced in this environment, but how does a professional handle, grow, thrive, survive in a toxic environment?
You have to define toxic because anything can become toxic. If it's linear, if it's over and over and over and over and over, I mean, it can become negative, can become toxic. So even positive things, if it's just constant, nonstop, I mean, it can become too much. So the idea, and let's go back to your question about stress. Stress is the stimulus for growth. So if you've got an overbearing boss, if you've got clients or students that are parents that are just push, 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 and you just don't, you have to figure out how you get recovery. So let's go back to the basic equation. Stress is a stimulus for growth. Recovery is when growth occurs. If you have no recovery, you have no growth. So the idea of recapturing energy and not letting things get too linear is really, really critical. Even if it's positive, I mean, if it's too much, it could still become toxic. It could still become overbearing. So the idea of how do you compartmentalize what we talked about a little earlier? How do you get a break from things? I think this is something that is sort of a little bit of a bothersome concept to me. You know, when people say they need a mental health break or a mental health day, I honestly don't know what that means. And I'm not being negative because I believe in mental health in a huge way. But I think that sometimes we're saying there's something stressful, so I need a mental health day. Well, the problem is What are you doing in that time away to help yourself heal or to improve the situation? Because if you do nothing and you come back the next day, whatever it is still there. So whether that's compartmentalizing, whether it's having somebody to talk to, getting counseling on learning to cope better, what are you doing when you need that time or that break away? So that's my concern, that you learn how to compartmentalize. Like if you've got a problem person, whoever that is, boss, parent, client, whatever it is, compartmentalize in the interaction with that person. And then when it's over, it's over. You have to see, we don't want to let it linger. This, as humans, we're behavioral beings, so it's easy, we finish the interaction and we're going, I can't believe that they treated me like that, and it's really hard to compartmentalize things. So that's part of our own learning and development, is to compartmentalize things and then teach ourselves to recapture energy when we get those moments that we can, whether that's sleep, whether that's engaging with someone else, whether it's laughter, whatever it might be, that we learn to do that appropriately. I
Yeah,
hope that.
a healthy outlet.
Yeah.
Because a lot of I mean, I know a lot of pros. I'm sure you do too, Kyle. I'm sure yourself, Dr. Groppel, have heard of many or have seen it yourself that turn to alcohol, turn to, sleep meds, whatever it is, because let's say you're a teaching pro, you're still dealing with parents, members, maybe a toxic boss, and a lot of people do turn to alcohol that I've seen.
But you have to understand that's recovery.
Mhm.
See, they've turned to these artificial means, whether it's drugs, sleep meds, or alcohol. That's an artificial mode of recovery. So it's an unhealthy way of getting recovery. Now, we're not talking about an afternoon cocktail. We're talking about you're resorting to meds, you're self-medicating. You know, that's definitely where you need to look in the mirror and take a snapshot of, what do I need to do to have a healthier mechanism in place to deal with whatever I'm dealing with.
Mhm.
But you got to understand that the mechanism they're using is the very same mechanism. It's recovery, but it's an artificial means of recovery.
Yeah, that can cause more problems.
Yes, certainly can.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is they start to use something else as a recovery, and then they just get into that downward spiral, and that's what they depend on.
Well, it becomes a dependency, and then it can become an addiction even, and then you've really got problems. When in fact it all started because, I shouldn't say it all started. It can start from a very simple mode if you would have, for example, I'm just a huge believer in counseling. And for no other reason, to have a third person speak into your heart and your mind who has no vested interest in the outcome. I think that's really healthy. I tell people I think everybody should be in counseling. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but it's just the state of the world right now that I just think we all are dealing with a lot. And social media hasn't helped this. This might be another conversation to have. The fact that we can check out of life with social media is a real problem. There's been books written about it. I've got some, that our culture is really in a different state right now with social media and the access to it.
Yeah, you start comparing yourself to other
Yep.
people. Comparison is a thief of joy. It
Yeah,
really,
you
really
numb
is.
out and you
Yeah.
become linear. Even if you're just playing games, you're not even, I mean, you just literally, you're on the sidelines of life. You're not in the game. That's the problem. You're on the sidelines.
Absolutely. And you share with us that you are working on your audiobook and an autobiography. Tell us about that. That sounds very
Well,
exciting.
yeah, I've had this amazing, wonderful, blessed life. And when I was on Kilimanjaro with my son, when he was 12 and I had artificial knees and we summited Mount Kilimanjaro, when I was on the mountain, it hit me that everything I was struggling with, it was hard. I mean, but it was exhilarating. I said, this is just like my life has been. I've had all these ups and downs, and I've lost marriages, and gosh, it's been tough, but it's been so wonderful. And I just said, I'm going to write the whole story. I'm not going to just talk about all the cool things. I'm going to tell the whole story. And that's what I started doing several years ago then. And it's going to be out this winter. I'm pretty excited about it. It'll be out in January. So thank you for asking about it. It's called, here, I've actually got well, there it is. Bang. Boom. That's all you get to see.
Oh, that's
What?
a
Come
tease.
on
That's a
now.
tease.
No, I haven't done a cover reveal yet. So anyway, it's called
Oh,
Oh.
Mountains Within, A Life of Achievement, A Quest for Meaning, and the Mountain That Changed Everything. That's the title of the book.
Oh,
And the whole piece is that we all have mountains within us.
we've
Thank you.
talked about some of those today. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I don't want to take much more of your time. We've had some technical difficulties, but this has been wonderful. It's going to turn out really good. And I cannot wait to read your book.
Well, you guys, I appreciate you both so much. And everybody
Yes.
listening, I just wish you all the best. Thank you for everything. Great to be with you. Take care.